Hello, and thank you for joining us again today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol Lawson, where we're so passionate about bringing inspirational leaders from around the world, Christian leaders in business, in church ministry, in the marketplace, who are doing great things for the glory of God. We want you to hear their stories, hear their lessons learned, hear their journeys, and be inspired to take your personal leadership to the next level. I'm confident that every single leadership episode is going to inspire you to be the very best that you can be. Now, I really encourage you to go back and listen to previous episodes. Like, we've done so many interviews now, men and women from across the world who are doing great things for God. Go back and listen to the interviews. You can check out our page at www.therisinggenerationpodcast.com or go to our iTunes page and listen there if you're on Apple, or our Stitcher page if you're on Android, and listen to our previous episodes. Some great nuggets of wisdom waiting there for you. Also ask that you go to our iTunes page or Stitcher page and give us maybe a 4 or 5 star rating if you enjoy the podcast. And the more ratings you get, the more we go up the rankings, and of course the more listeners that we'll get. And so we'd really appreciate your help with that. Now, if you're listening today as well and you get some kind of, you're going to be stirred and you're getting some questions that are coming up for you and you want some more support, please feel free to email me directly. And my email is errol@errollawson.com. Email me and we do a question, and I'll be happy to offer you some support if I can do. Or maybe you want some coaching. And what we're doing right now is we're offering a free 30 to 45 minute coaching session with anybody out there. Maybe you're a leader, you're a pastor, you're a lay leader, you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, and you want some coaching around an issue or a question that has arisen for you as you've been listening to the podcast. So please feel free to email me. We'll get you booked in. If you're wondering what coaching is, it's not counseling, it's not mentoring as such. It's more me sitting down with you, whether in person, if you're local, or over Skype, and to simply have a conversation and asking you questions to help you get the clarity you're looking for in your business, ministry, or with an idea you're working on right now. Yeah, so it's completely free of charge, no obligation at all. But feel free to email me at errol@errollawson.com, and we'll get you booked in right away. All right, so get ready to enjoy this next episode. I pray that you'll enjoy it, and please share with your friends or your colleagues or someone you think might also benefit from hearing this great interview. Thank you for listening again. God bless you. Hello, and thank you for joining us again today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast. Really glad to have you here today. And we've got an amazing guest with us today, all the way from the US of A. His name is Devin Thorpe. Devin's done a lot of things. He's known for a lot of things. I'm going to ask Devin to introduce himself in a little while, but just for a bit of background, he's the founder of the Your Mark on the World Center. He calls himself a champion of social good, and he writes about and advocates for those who are doing good. He's traveled extensively as a volunteer doing service, as a journalist finding heroes, and as a speaker sharing what he's learned. As a Forbes contributor, he covers social entrepreneurship and impact investing. He's produced over 500 episodes of his Your Mark on the World show featuring luminary change agents. His books on personal finance and crowdfunding draw on his entrepreneurial finance experience as an investment banker, CFO, treasurer, and a mortgage broker, helping people use financial resources to do good. Previously, he worked on the US Senate Banking Committee staff and earned an MBA at Cornell. Devin, that's your bio there, but if you will, please fill in any gaps for us in that biography and just tell us a bit about what you're up to in the world right now.
Well, thank you, Errol. It's a pleasure to meet you. I really appreciate your interest in what I'm doing, and really am honored to be on your show today. Thank you. Probably the biggest gap in the story there is my faith. And I think you and I share a common faith in Jesus Christ and the power that he has to influence and empower our lives. And certainly I'm guilty of not always centering my message around that in the secular world in which we live. But certainly I share that faith in Jesus Christ that you have, and believe that the work I do is inspired by him and empowered by him.
Amen. Amen. And so what are you up to in the world right now?
So I'm working on all kinds of things right now. I'm working on a book about corporate social responsibility to help corporations figure out how they can add purpose to their company mission. and improve their profitability at the same time. And working on kind of my magnum opus I've been working on for a couple of years still, which is a book about how we really can change the world. And I'm excited to see us solve some of the world's biggest problems here in the next 30 years. And for young guys like you, that's a really relevant timeline. You'll still be, in your careers when we see the world really, you'll be able to look back and see just enormous social changes, elimination of poverty and disease and all kinds of other problems as you get older. And I'm excited to play a small role in advancing the work that much better people than I are engaged in to make the world a better place.
Awesome. And tell us a bit about the Your Mark on the World Center. Where did that begin and what's it all about?
So the Your Mark on the World Center began as my blog, really. But what it is it is my business that I use for sharing information. And I've got 3 websites: yourmarkontheworld.com, mysocialgoodnews.com, and goodcrowd.info, which the last site is focused entirely on crowdfunding for social causes. And so it's not a crowdfunding site; it's a news site about crowdfunding for social good. So doing all kinds of things, but that's fundamentally the work that we do, is to help people do more good in the world.
Awesome.
To champion the work of people like you who are making a difference.
Awesome, man. So tell us about your background. Where did it start? I mean, you mentioned you're a Christian. Did you grow up in church? What's your testimony, if you like?
So, probably the foundational story for me was in 1976 when there was a dam in a community or near a community called Rexburg, Idaho. This is out in the western United States, not too far from where I live, that this dam failed the first time it was filled with water. So it got all the way full of water, and then the dam failed, and then that water rushed through the town of Rexburg, damaging or destroying about 80% of the structures in that.
Wow.
So people from all around the western United States rallied around this community. This community was part of a larger Christian movement of people, the Mormons out here. And so people from all around the West came to and visited Rexburg to help them dig the muck and mud out of basements. And I was only 11 years old, but my father came to me that summer and he said, "Devin, I'm going to dig the muck and mud out of basements tomorrow in Rexburg. Would you like to come?" And I thought that sounded like a good idea. Digging muck and mud out of basements sounded fun. So I went, and it was a great experience. I'm not a very big guy. I'm about 5'5". You can imagine that as an 11-year-old, I probably wasn't in a position to really do much good, but I sure felt like I had done some good that day. And I remember vowing that I would never miss an opportunity to serve.
Wow.
And so I've strived to do that ever since. Now, I've missed a lot of opportunities to do good along the way. I certainly haven't been true to that mission in every opportunity, but about 5 years ago, I was fired from the best job I'd ever had as the CFO of a multinational corporation, and had the opportunity to sort of refocus my life on, that pledge I'd made as a young man. And so I've been trying to build a career around championing the good work that other people are doing to try and make the world a better place.
Wow. It's great, man. And along your journey, your leadership journey, was there ever a turning point for you, or an epiphany almost moment, where maybe you were heading in one direction and something happened, an event happened, and it caused you to change direction?
Well, certainly those 2 turning points in my life that I mentioned really are the opportunity as an 11-year-old to go dig muck and mud out of basements and see really firsthand what it felt to do real service. And then the second one was when I was fired and had an opportunity later in life to refocus and recast my career in a way that I could focus on that early desire to do good.
Mm-hmm. And what was the lesson you learned from that experience?
I think the most exciting thing for me is that, in fact, there is a way to make it work. if you really have a passion for something, there is a way to do it and to be successful and to have a career and to have the impact you want to have. I've got a lot left to do. I've got to grow and develop myself, but I am excited that I've kind of proven to myself that this can work. I can make a living doing the things I want to do and helping people to change the world.
That's great. And what's been your biggest challenge so far in leadership?
I think the biggest challenge has been for me trying to build, because I'm self-employed, it's trying to build the business, right? I think the entrepreneurial struggles that I face are the biggest for me in terms of trying to constantly identify new sources of revenue. And I speak. I've got online courses. I've written books. I've got all these different activities, and so it's always just a challenge to try and build all of these different parts into one real business and to be successful at it. That's the big challenge for me.
And what's the lesson in that for our listeners? I reckon there's probably quite a few people right now feeling the same way, pursuing a calling, a mission, a cause, and trying to balance stuff out, trying to deal with that issue of my income and still believing there's a sense of purpose in them, something to do, something to change the world. What's the lesson been in that journey for you so far?
I think there are a number of lessons, but certainly one is to stay focused on those big challenges. For me, I've got to work harder at the sales aspect to actually generate revenue. That's a challenge. And then one of the other lessons is to always be sure to manage the spending both in your business and your personal life. And so that's another challenge, because if you can reduce your spending, you can reduce the amount of income that you need in order to be happy, in order to cover your nut. And I remember when I was working as the CFO of a big corporation, I had a big salary, and that would support a lot of spending. And I don't spend like that anymore in order to make things work, because I put mission first now.
It's great. I love that. And I reckon that speaks to so many people who are thinking about pursuing their mission. And these are just some really practical things that you've got to have in place in order for you to not put yourself in a place of debt or being a burden to yourself or anyone else around you. Just some really practical stuff. I mean, I know you're contributing to Forbes at the moment, Forbes Online. You're one of their contributors, and your book is doing very well on Amazon, I see. It's quite high up there in the charts. At this stage in your journey, having done all that you have done and been involved in, how do you now define success at this stage?
I think defining success for me, it's all about meeting kind of a minimum hurdle on economic success, but really it's about making a difference in the world. And so I've been thinking about this really for months, about how to define my objectives and goals. But I think as I look in the longest term, I think there are some things that I would like to see happen in the world, and I can't take credit for them coming about, but I want to work on advancing these efforts. And there are a number of them specifically that I think we can solve. They're big world problems. One is extreme poverty. I think we can eliminate extreme poverty in the next 30 years. In fact, the UN thinks we can do it in the next 15 years. And I'm excited to follow the work of people who are working successfully to do that. I've identified a number of people that are working at scale in these areas, and I'm excited about their work. I am excited about the prospect of really curing cancer in the next 30 years. For the very first time in really the history of cancer, we're starting to see doctors talk about some of the new therapies for cancer treatments as cures, that people are really truly being cured of some cancers. That's really exciting, and it reflects a whole new shift in thinking. In the last 10 years, research has shifted away from some of the traditional chemotherapies to some new immunology kinds of things in cancer research. Very exciting there, as well as radically improved earlier diagnostic tools that are both affordable and powerful. So I think cancer is something that can become virtually eliminated in the next 30 years. Blindness, something that we view as just a tragic part of the human condition that some people can't see, that appears to be the kind of thing that can be solved in the next 30 years. Very exciting to think about helping the blind to be able to see again. So that's a phenomenal and exciting field to be looking at. I look at homelessness, which is really different than extreme poverty because it's such a complex mix of people with such different needs. So you look at people who are struggling with mental illness and that sort of thing. So anyway, I think there is a real opportunity for us to solve big world problems in the next 30 years.
And that's really, it's not everybody that thinks about solving such big problems as you just mentioned. I'm curious to know, where did that desire come from? Was it something that, have you always felt that way about solving such problems in the world? Was it something, the way you were raised by your parents? Was it an experience you had, a mentor you had? Where did it come from?
Well, this specific focus comes from studying the eradication of polio. Now, you grew up in a time when nobody got polio. In the UK, there hasn't been a case of polio in your lifetime. And I think that's nearly true of my experience. I think there were the last polio cases were about the time I was born in the United States.
But what led you to study that?
But there are still people who get polio in the world. There are very, very few. In the 1980s, there were nearly 400,000 cases a year of polio around the world, mostly in the developing world, in places like Ghana. But today, it's only Pakistan and Afghanistan where you can get polio, the only two places on Earth. And so far this year, there have only been about 60 cases. So it's pretty clear that we're now to the point where we can predict that 2016 will be the last year that anyone on the planet gets polio.
Okay.
This is very exciting. And
I've been studying that, though, Devin? What motivated you? What gave you that proclivity? Where did it come from?
Well, I joined Rotary about 3 years ago. I'm a Johnny-come-lately here, but Rotary's been working on the eradication of polio for 30 years.
Right.
And as I began to study that, I saw not only an exciting achievement in the eradication of polio as an event in itself, but it became more clearly to me a model for how we can solve big world problems.
Right.
And obviously you can't be too literal in copying the Rotary effort at eliminating polio in attacking other problems, but there are parallels that I think one can draw that do inform how we approach these other global problems. And the first is the way that Rotary got started in polio. They just started doing it. They just started inoculating people, and then they built support around the world. And then, what's interesting is that about 10 years ago, the world was really pretty close to eradicating polio. There were very few cases. There were just a few hundred cases a year. And I think the people in the polio world thought that if they just kept doing what they were doing, that polio would sort of peter out. But it didn't. It kept on going at that few hundred cases a year and actually surged up over 1,000 cases a year. And so things were getting worse. And what the polio folks realized is that they had to make an extra hard push to solve polio, to really extinguish this scourge. And I think that really is a powerful lesson that can easily be lost. And that the real effort to solve a global problem, is going to come at the end. We can't just coast across the finish line on eradicating poverty or anything else. And so that's been kind of an interesting aspect. And so it's been kind of inspiring to me to study the eradication of polio and see what that means for us in terms of solving other big world problems.
Fantastic, man.
Are you seriously fired up about developing leaders and growing your church to the next level? Could you do with someone to help you get some extra clarity or to be a sounding board for your plans and ideas? Great athletes have coaches, so do great leaders. The right leadership coach for you will result in increasing your performance and dramatically increase the results you achieve. Errol is an experienced leadership coach, award-winning author and entrepreneur, and pastor. He has interviewed over 60 of the most influential Christian leaders from around the world for the Rising Generation Leadership podcast, and uses his unique insights, leadership experience, and his passion for the gospel to coach Christian leaders and help them to discover the clarity, confidence, and competence they are looking for. If you're ready to go to the next level, leverage Errol's experience and extensive network of contacts to help grow your ministry or support you in your personal and professional development. To experience the power and benefit of Errol's coaching, contact us now to arrange a free 30-minute strategy session that will help you to understand exactly what your next step needs to be. Email admin@errollawson.com right now to schedule your call.
And, talking about solving big world problems, a lot of the people who are listening now are probably going to be emerging leaders or established leaders. Maybe they're looking at how they can serve God in whatever capacity and not sure. And I think we could do with more people who are solving big world problems, right? Do you think we should be thinking about solving bigger world problems? And how do you inspire the next generation to be thinking on that level, on that plane?
The wonderful thing about the rising generation is that they seem to have a natural connection to these things already.
Right.
That they seem to be more focused on solving big world problems and social issues than past generations. My generation, the generation ahead of me, we were a little bit more focused on financial security for our families. I don't know all the cultural triggers that created that, but we are in a place now where I think a lot of young people are already very focused on it. And so the trick for a lot of people isn't what we should be doing in terms of goals and objectives, but trying to empower them to actually do something. Because I think that there is a great cultural shift that the young generation is leading to focus us on solving these problems. And so now the process and the key, I think, is to learn the lessons like we can from polio eradication for how we solve the big world problems.
It's great, man. I think what you're saying is really good. That just we need to get out and do something, right? And start somewhere. As a young person listening, maybe they're saying to themselves, hey, I want to do great things for God. I want to solve big world problems. Where should they begin? Where should they start? I know they should do something, but any advice for that person? What should they do?
I think the key bit of advice I would offer people is to just start doing something. It sounds simple. It sounds overly simple. But there is so much that you will learn by just doing something to solve a problem that it will create its own momentum.
Right.
As you start doing something and start accomplishing milestones, marking progress, you're going to naturally draw other people into your sphere, and pretty soon your solo efforts become a movement, and that movement has the capacity to really have a lasting, changing impact on the world, and that's where the excitement comes. But it all starts with that single effort, that one person says, I'm just going to go do something to solve this problem today. I'm going to go start feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, whatever it is. I get after it and start doing. Quite frankly, it's what Jesus teaches us, right? And think of Matthew 25, right? And the parable of the sheep and the goats. We're talking about, taking care of one another.
That's great, man. And I know this question, I'm sure it changes every day for you, but I think it was John Maxwell that said, success is hidden in your daily routine. Typically, what does the first 90 minutes of your day look like?
Typically that for me is getting up in the morning, and I always start my day with prayer. I am religious about that. And then usually I'll have a small breakfast and then go for a run. In the good weather months, I'll run outside. In the bad weather months, like right now, I'm in Utah and there's a blizzard outside. So this morning I ran on a treadmill. And then I will come back from my run. While I run, I usually listen to a book. Right now, I'm listening to the biography of Jonas Salk, the guy who invented the polio vaccine. And it's a really inspiring biography. Wow. So, awesome. And then I'll come in usually and start reading my email and get on with my day. But that's usually how I start.
And what have been the key habits that have contributed to your success?
Well, that's a really challenging question for me. I feel on the one hand that I have been very fortunate in life. I've been very successful in many ways, but I'm reluctant to accept the idea that I, in any sense, have arrived. And so I stumble over this question of what contributed to my success when I'm not altogether sure that I am a success. But certainly the things that have helped me in life include my faith. Certainly that is key. It's been vitally important to me. I realize that there are a lot of wonderful people who are atheists, and I respect and admire them. Some of them are my best friends, but I personally, for myself, draw tremendous strength from my faith in Jesus Christ, and that inspires me. And some of the other lessons I think that have been important to me are my family. I was raised by wonderful parents. I've got a wonderful, supportive wife, and being true and faithful to her has been the smartest thing I've ever done. She's been great to me and helped me through my life in all kinds of ways, and so I'm grateful for that. And for her. And so, those really fundamental things, I think have more to do with our success than we sometimes want to admit. It isn't necessarily our business acumen that allows us to be successful as the emotional and spiritual support we get from our faith and our families.
Absolutely. And as a leader, what's your biggest weakness?
Boy, that is a real challenge because I have a lot of weaknesses. But I think my greatest weakness is my ability or willingness to sell, to pick up the phone and actually ask people to hire me, to share my message. And I think that, it doesn't just limit my financial situation. It limits my impact. And that's really, I think, the key thing that I would observe and that I really want to change is that I need to be able to increase the amount of impact I have on other people by actually being more financially successful. Those things can and should go together.
And I think a lot of people feel the same way, that whole idea that, picking up the phone and making that sales call, that phone can feel like a brick sometimes to pick up. And it's like, I think oftentimes people are afraid of hearing no and rejection. And just want to encourage anybody out there who's listening who feels the same way. I think we've all experienced that. Who likes no? Nobody likes to hear no. No one likes to be told no. And I encourage, there's a great book out there called Go for No, for anyone listening. Go for No is a great book on the subject, just to really encourage you. I think the key thing that Devin said for me there is that there's a connection between your ability to put yourself out there, take that risk and face that possible rejection, and your impact. And depending on what your calling is, your mission is, there's going to be a need to develop the skill, I think, of being able to pick up that phone and the confidence to say, hey, I'm going to do it not because I want to do it necessarily, but because I've got an impact to make, I've got a mission to accomplish, and that why is going to motivate me and just give me the confidence and the courage really to get out and do it. So I want to encourage you listening, you feel the same way. You can see the great things that Devin's doing already, things that he's done already. You're only going to just go on to Google his name and you see he's made a great impact. And the great thing about our conversations here is that you can identify with people who are influential and just human beings, just like you and I, who have challenges, man. But you too can overcome them as well. You too can overcome them. So, Devin, on the flip side of that, Devin, what's your biggest strength?
Oh, golly. I hate talking about these sorts of things, but I am not by any stretch, and you can tell just by listening to me, that I'm not the world's greatest communicator.
I've seen you speak,
but
man.
that is probably but that's probably my greatest strength. I enjoy writing. I know a lot of people struggle to get words on paper. I can sit down at the computer and I can get words down, and I can get my thoughts organized in a meaningful way. I've got a show like you. Mine's a little different platform, but I can speak a little bit. I travel around. I'm often invited to speak, and I've spoken on most of the continents around the world, and I enjoy that opportunity. So I guess I have to look at communication as my greatest skill. I can also make a mean spreadsheet when I need to.
You started out at the beginning of your leadership journey, your entrepreneurial journey. What was holding you back? If anything was holding you back, what was it?
In the broadest sense of leadership, I have never struggled with that. I guess I shouldn't say never, but it's been since junior high school, since that was really a problem. I was the student body president of my high school. I've been the president and chairman of Mountain West Capital Network. I was the chairman of the University of Utah Business Alumni Association. I'm on the board of my Rotary Club. I'm the chief of staff of our Rotary district. And so I have often been in positions of leadership throughout my life. And I attribute that to my willingness to do the hard work. So oftentimes what I literally mean is it's the shoveling muck and mud out of basements.
Right.
That has won me the respect of people who then called upon me to be a leader. It is not that I am tall and handsome and especially articulate. It is that I've been willing to do some of the hard work that is required. So I think that's one of the key lessons I would take away from my experience.
It's great. That's a great example. Who have been your most significant mentors in your journey, Devin?
I'm constantly looking at people like you that I encounter as great mentors. And so, today I'm sure I'll go to bed thinking of you as my mentor of the day. The things you do that inspire me and inspire others will leave me thinking about you today as a mentor. But probably one of the people that I think most highly of as a mentor in my life that really influenced my life for a long period of time is a fellow who I came to know as the pastor or bishop of my church when I was a teenager. In fact, it was about the time I went up to Rexburg to dig muck and mud out of the basement. But this fellow, I used to mow his lawn. He hired me to mow his lawn, and he was very fastidious. He wanted it done just so. Mm-hmm. And I certainly didn't do it perfectly, but I worked hard to take care of his lawn summer after summer. And I made a point to stay in touch with him over the years, and he ended up having a fantastic career. And as we stayed in touch, he hired me later on in my career to be the treasurer of a multinational public company.
Wow.
And then later on in our careers, he was invited to be the chief financial officer for a fast-growing food and beverage company, and he didn't choose to take that opportunity, but he said to the CEO that invited him, you really ought to hire Devin, and they did.
Wow.
And so he had a tremendous impact on my life, and I can trace that back to having worked really hard at mowing his lawn and earning respect as a 13-year-old kid.
Awesome. Any other mentors?
Well, certainly there have been a lot of mentors, but he's certainly the most significant.
Wow. And just to dig into that relationship a little bit more, what was it that that story there is amazing. But is there anything else a significant piece of advice that he gave you?
He was not one to give me a lot of advice, but he was one to set a great example. And so some of the things that I learned from him were to stand on principle, but always be respectful of others. And that's why I think he's been more successful in his career than I, because he was better at being respectful of others.
How do you mean?
So the big challenge in my life wasn't standing on principle. Mm-hmm. I didn't lack for principles, really. It was my ability to communicate principles, to be able to guide my partners, even my bosses, in a way that was constructive to them and felt good to them. And I think this, you can probably relate to this as you work with young people, that you've got to find a way to communicate and inspire them, that they will respect and recognize, so that they will want to do what you're telling them to do, even though it might be hard. And my mentor was really good at doing that with his boss, which is the same kind of challenge. Really, when you have to say to your boss, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to spend this money on this project, even though it's going to be a lot of money. Or in the alternative, we can't do this project you want to do because we don't have the financial resources to do it right now. That kind of tension, it can be frustrating. And he was really good at being so respectful in dealing with his superiors that he was able to win their confidence, and they would follow his advice without feeling like there had been any conflict there. And my pattern in life was to be a little too confrontational, right? To insist we have to do it this way because this is the right way. And that results in people feeling uncomfortable. And ultimately, it doesn't build those long-term relationships. So that was one of the things certainly I valued in his example for me. And I never did fully emulate that, but I would like to.
It's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And maybe we're almost done now, but what's the one thing you're most fired up about right now?
Well, it is the possibility, the potential we have in my lifetime and yours, which means in the lifetimes of almost everyone who's alive, we can solve these big world problems. And I get excited about that. And so I'm excited about the things that I'm doing that I believe will advance that. So I'm writing a book, I've got a speech, and I'm sharing that message in every way that I can. And that fires me up. That's what gets me up in the morning, to know that I'm a part of what I see as the solution to some of the world's biggest problems.
Yeah, actually, that's a question, Devin. We spoke before about, we asked how does someone kind of change the world, and then we agreed, do something, start where you are, do something. But I want to ask, what else is in that black box, if you like? Because if someone just starts doing something today, solving a problem today, do they suddenly end up solving a big world problem? Or are there other things, other components to the process?
Yeah, the next big component in that is really collaboration. I like to say you only have to collaborate if you want to have impact.
Right.
And it just is vital to achieving scale. Let me give you just a simple but maybe dramatic bit of advice. Let's say you have an idea for how you could help young people do better in school. And you have a specific model or a program for doing that. You can go out and teach that program one kid at a time, maybe one school at a time. Or you could find someone who's already delivering content to schools around the world and partner with them to distribute that content through their existing channel, and suddenly you could be impacting the lives of millions of kids around the world instead of the one in front of you. And so that's a dramatic example of how collaboration can really change the scale of what you're doing and allow you to actually change the world in meaningful scale. So that's just one example, and maybe an oversimplification, but I think it helps to illustrate this idea of the power of collaboration.
Wow, I like that. I think we could say that that's a great line of conversation to go down right there. I think that it's really clear, and your example is actually relevant to me, to be honest with you. So collaboration, so action, doing something, collaboration. Is there any other key component in there?
Well, the final step is what I call the Endgame Strategy, and I borrow this from the polio effort, right? And it's recognizing that, let's say you've got your program into schools around the world, and you are helping youth around the world overcome challenges, and you've got 90% of the troubled kids now are graduating from high school, and they're going on to successful careers in trades or in university or whatever. And so you say, we're 90% of the way there. Mm-hmm. The reality is the last 10%, the last kids that need help, that for whatever reason haven't taken to the program, they're going to be harder and more expensive and more difficult to reach. Right. And so you're going to have to do new things, harder things. You're going to need more money, bigger budgets, more collaborators in order to reach those last final people. They didn't get caught up in the program as it was rolled out and scaled up because they are difficult to reach. There's something different about them. Are they less worthy of help? Does God love them less? No. I mean, they are as important to God as you and I are, and as the first 90% were, but they're going to be more difficult to reach. And so it's the least simple part of the process, but clearly developing a strategy, a budget, and partnerships that will allow us to get to the end to help everyone is going to be the real challenge in solving these things. And so you think about that with cancer. Yes, some cancers are going to be easier to cure than others. And 20 years from now, we'll have cured all of the easy ones, and we'll be dealing with the hardest ones. And they will be more expensive and more difficult to cure than the ones we cure in the next 20 years. And that will be true in terms of eradicating poverty around the world. It will be most intransigent in the places where it is hardest to root out, and it will take new initiatives, new thinking, and bigger budgets to solve, poverty eradication in the most difficult places. And so that endgame strategy is difficult to be thinking about at the beginning, but we've got to recognize whatever we're doing, whatever problem we're working to solve, we will get to a place where we will say, oh my gosh, we're there. We need to do something new, different, bigger, and better in order to get the last problem solved.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Devin, man. And just lastly, Devin, is there a book or a resource that you recommend for a leader out there?
Well, I'm going to give you one that isn't a leadership book because I think you're great leaders. People you're teaching are getting great leadership insight from you every time they participate in any of your programs, listen to your show. But what I would want them to do is to see not only the possibility for solving the problems in the world, but the opportunities that are there. And one of the best books I've found for that is a book by Nicholas Kristof called A Path Appears. It's actually by Nick Kristof and his wife, Cheryl Wu Dunn. They're both New York Times correspondents, phenomenal people, Pulitzer Prize winners, amazing. But A Path Appears is the name of that book. And it will help you see how people are solving big world problems. They're scaling up solutions, and it will inspire, I think, anyone who reads them to see opportunity in those big world problems.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Devin, It's been amazing speaking to you today. I really appreciate your time and what you're doing in the world and just your ideas and your thinking and your outlook, and just really glad that you are sharing what you're doing with the world. And just pray God's blessing on what you're doing, and that many, many more people will be inspired by the work that you do. And as I'm sure they will be by hearing this interview today. So thank you so much for your time today, Nicholas, and God bless you, man. God bless you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you again for joining us today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast. I pray you've been inspired, you've been lifted, you've been encouraged to take your personal leadership to the next level. We really encourage you guys to just take action, make it happen, do something, start somewhere, go out and change the world in some way, big or small. Guys, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please share with your friends, share with your loved ones, your colleagues, someone out there you think might benefit from hearing this great content. And if you want some more questions answering, you got a question, email me, Errol at errollawson.com. Or if you want a free 30 to 45 minute coaching session with myself around the leadership challenge or issue you're working on in your business, your church, or in your organization, please feel free to email me right away. We'll get you booked in. It's Errol at errollawson.com. Thank you again for listening. Go to our iTunes page, check it out, check out the previous episodes. Give us a nice review. That would be awesome. Really appreciate if you could do that for us. We really appreciate you just for being here and listening. Thank you so much. God bless you. We'll see you on the next episode of The Rising Generation.